I never imagined I'd find myself sharing my story on YouTube. But here I am, Vincent, a 24-year-old guy, stuck in a situation that makes every horror flick feel like child's play. Believe me, I could have done without all of this. It all started about a week ago when life in my parents' two-story home, nestled in a quiet suburb near Portland, shifted from mundane to terrifying. With my mom, a sensible high school teacher, and my dad, a no-nonsense construction foreman, I've always felt secure. The sense of security shattered last Tuesday. I was burning the midnight oil, cramming for an upcoming exam, when the clock struck 4:30 a.m. Just as exhaustion crept in, I heard a strange noise, our doorbell ringing like an angry alarm. Who could be ringing our bell at this hour? My heart raced as I crept down the stairs, the unwelcome sound still echoing in my head. As I peered through the peephole, a chill gripped my gut. An elderly woman stood there, her skeletal frame cloaked in shadows, black voids where her eyes should be. The sight sent a jolt through me, and when Mom came to investigate, her horrified gasp marked the beginning of our descent into a nightmare we could never have prepared for. As night after night passed, I watched helplessly as this sinister figure drew closer, shattering the very sense of safety my parents had built around me. Each encounter turned our home into a battleground of fear, logic interwoven, Doshi madness, and I knew that whatever was haunting us was only just getting started. As the days passed, my parents and I tried everything to rid ourselves of this supernatural presence. We called in priests, paranormal experts, even tried performing our own rituals and cleansings. But nothing seemed to work. The entity only grew stronger with each passing day. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a dusty old book in our attic that things started to make sense. The book described creatures known as night terrors who fed on fear and terrorized their victims until they were consumed by them. Armed with this new knowledge, I was able to identify the entity haunting us as one of these night terrors. And with my newfound understanding, I began formulating a plan to defeat it. I convinced my parents to leave the house for a few days, claiming we needed a break from the chaos. In reality, I needed time alone to execute my plan. Using sage and holy water, I performed a cleansing ritual throughout the entire house. And then, in the dead of night, I confronted the night terror face to face. With all the courage I could muster, I stood my ground as it tried to instill fear within me. But armed with knowledge and determination, I was able to withstand its attacks and ultimately banish it from our home. I never thought I'd be the kind of person posting on no sleep, but here I am. I need to get this off my chest, and maybe someone out there has dealt with something similar. God, I hope not, but I'm desperate for answers. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Jake, a 19-year-old college student, living with my parents in a small town just outside of Portland, Oregon. We've got a cozy 2-story house on a quiet street, surrounded by towering pine trees. It's usually peaceful here, but for the past week, our nights have been anything but. My mom, Sarah, is a high school English teacher. She's always been the rational one in the family, with a no-nonsense attitude that usually keeps us grounded. Dad, on the other hand, is Mike, a former Marine turned construction foreman. He's got that tough guy exterior, but I've always known he's a softie at heart, especially when it comes to me and Mom. It all started last Tuesday. I was up late studying for a biology exam, my eyes burning from staring at my textbook for hours. I glanced at my phone, 4:30 a.m. Shit, I muttered, realizing I'd have to be up for class in just a few hours. That's when I heard it, the distinct sound of our doorbell. Who the hell would be ringing our doorbell at this hour? I crept downstairs, my heart pounding. Our chihuahua, Scooby, was already at the door, growling softly. I peeked through the peephole and felt my blood run cold. There, illuminated by our porch light, stood an old woman. She was thin, almost skeletal, with wispy white hair that seemed to float around her head. Her eyes were sunken, and her expression was blank. I hesitated, unsure if I should open the door. But before I could make a decision, she spoke in a raspy voice that sent shivers down my spine. "I need your help," she said. I opened the door slowly, my heart still racing. "What can I do for you?" I asked tentatively. The old woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she just stared at me with those empty eyes. Finally, she spoke again. "I need you to come with me," she said. "Come with you? Where?" "To the forest." At this point, I was extremely wary. I didn't know who this woman was or what she wanted from me. But there was an urgency in her voice that made me curious. And besides, my biology exam could wait a little longer. So, against my better judgment, I followed the old woman into the dark forest behind our house. As we walked deeper into the trees, I couldn't shake off the feeling of uneasy that settled in my stomach. The old woman remained silent, leading me down a narrow path until we reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a large tree with its gnarled branches and deep black roots that seemed to stretch endlessly into the ground. "Here," said the old woman, pointing to the tree. I stepped closer and saw that there were strange markings etched into the trunk of the tree. They almost looked like symbols or a language I couldn't understand. The old woman handed me a small bag and instructed me to sprinkle its contents on the tree while reciting an incantation. As skeptical as I was, I followed her instructions, and soon enough, something incredible happened. The tree began to glow with a warm orange light, and from its branches emerged a beautiful butterfly. It floated around us before landing on my outstretched hand. "Thank you," said the old woman, smiling for the first time since we met. "You have helped me awaken the spirit of this tree." I was in awe, but before I could ask any questions, the old woman disappeared into thin air. I stood there for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. And then I heard my mother calling out to me from our house. I quickly made my way back home and decided not to tell anyone about my encounter with the old woman or the magical tree. But from that day on, I couldn't help but feel a deeper connection with nature and its mysteries. Stepping back into the familiar surroundings of my home, I found it hard to shake off the enchantment of that day. The memory of the glowing tree and the butterfly lingered in my mind, and I began to take notice of the small wonders in my everyday life. Each rustling leaf, each playful gust of wind seemed to whisper secrets. As the days turned into weeks, I realized that nature held an elegance and depth I had once overlooked, inspiring me to explore and learn more about the environment around me. If you enjoyed this little adventure and wish to discover more, consider subscribing for more tales.